Welcome to Diamonds in Dumpster Fires. I'm Melie, and this is the podcast for people who are determined to find a glimmer of hope even while the fires of life are burning around them. Together, we'll dumpster dive through all sorts of topics like divorce, dating, friendships, grief, career ups and downs, and so much more. All with a sense of humor and absolutely no toxic positivity. Are you ready? Let's go. Hello, and welcome to episode 1 of Diamonds in Dumpster Fires. I am so excited that you're here and joining me on this journey to discover life's joy despite setbacks and find those diamonds in the midst of the dumpster fires of our lives. So, I'm Melie, and I will be your host through this podcast. Some episodes you'll hear just from me, and some I will be bringing on guests to talk about all sorts of ways that people have overcome, found joy despite setbacks, and all the topics that go on in life. Today's episode is just a little different than most are going to be because I'm going to give you a little bit of a background into who I am and how I came to start Diamonds in Dumpster Fires. So to kick us off, I am going to start by taking us way back to another time and another place. This time and place is called before COVID. Do you all remember what it was like before COVID? I think some of us maybe have romanticized it to the point that we just maybe see it with rose-colored glasses, and there's no convincing us that anything that we believe about it isn't true. And I say us because I am in that camp. But, to my defense, a lot of my life changed right as we went into lockdown for COVID in a way that never recovered. And I'm here to tell you a little bit about that. So, prior to COVID, I was a married woman. I was a military spouse. I was living in San Diego, and quite honestly, if you had known me, even though I wasn't probably the happiest person in the world, I know I wasn't because I'm always a little bit cynical, but my life was pretty good. In fact, sometimes I think about that life now and I just long for it. Have you ever had that happen? You think about your life as it was and you long for it, and No, okay, I have heard all of the stories about nostalgia. I have had therapy sessions where we've talked about how, well, it probably wasn't as good as I'm imagining it. But this is the picture I'm painting, okay? I was married, military spouse, beautiful life in San Diego, a beautiful home that my husband and I had purchased, and honestly, everything looked like it was just going to be going up from there. So here I am living this life in San Diego, and my husband takes me out to a wonderful dinner one night. We share just a great meal and decide, you know what, we're going to come back to this restaurant when he gets back from this trip that he was going on. So he was going to be gone for about a month, a training trip, and this is not uncommon in the military that they will go and, do various things. So here I am waiting for his return. It's March of 2020. We all know this time, right? This is like burned in our brains, March of 2020. But this was where I was at. So waiting for him to come home, and we're hearing about all of this COVID stuff, right? But nobody really had a full picture of what that looked like just yet. So I get a message from him, and he lets me know that I should probably not be home when he gets home because it looks like he has been exposed to this COVID thing, whatever it was. I'm not even sure if they were calling it COVID at this point, but you get the point. So we go back and forth, and I end up saying, okay, I would, just stay at my parents' house while he came home. He comes home, reaches out to me when he gets home and lets me know that he is not sick. He's actually quite well, and that he does not ever want to see me again. I was devastated. Devastated just doesn't even seem to barely encompass the feelings that I had. I was sick. I felt desperate to try to save my marriage, to try to, get back to my home. And at this point, the lockdown happens. So we all know the lockdown, and me being the rule follower that I am, I stayed inside at my parents' house. and tried to communicate with my husband, but he really didn't want to talk to me. He just kind of wanted to let things end. Now, you may be wondering, well, what were you married, like 6 months? No. I was married for 14 years. 14 years of my life that I had dedicated to this marriage. And no, I'm not sitting here saying I was the perfect wife. Of course not. But it was very important to me. My marriage mattered to me. I loved my husband. I wanted to fight for my marriage. I did not get the chance to do that. I actually never saw my husband again, my now ex-husband. I've never seen him. I've never had more than a couple-minute phone call with him since he decided to file for divorce. We did have one conversation in between the time when he had made that decision that he wanted to file before he actually filed, and it was not a great one, and he had already pretty much made up his mind, but he did agree to have this one call with me, and after that, I never had a chance to even talk to him. Everything we did with the divorce went through lawyers. We had some exchanges back and forth with text, but he absolutely refused to have a conversation with me. And he kept promising me that once everything was finalized, he would then, give me the opportunity to talk to him and to let him know what I was feeling and have that sort of closure conversation. That conversation never happened either. The divorce finalized, he moved on, started a new life, a new family, and I was left to kind of pick up the pieces of my life by myself. And, divorce will affect people differently, but universally, I think we can all agree divorce is awful, right? Even if you're the one that wants the divorce, it changes you in ways that you didn't see coming. It can be so heart-wrenching and just so confusing. But in the midst of going through that, I was on lockdown. I was stuck inside. I was away from my home. And so I had to fully start over. In fact, even the day I went to my now, former house to get my things, my ex left for the day. He didn't want to see me, pulled most of my items into the garage and obviously I had access to the house and movers, but I had this very short window to get all my stuff from San Diego, move it up to Orange County where I was temporarily living, and most of my things just went into a storage unit. That day, while we were unloading the moving truck into the storage unit, there was a huge fire going on here in California, and there were literal ashes falling from the sky into our hair and our eyes as we're trying to unload this moving truck. So there is a sign that Diamonds and Dumpster Fires was coming because I literally moved in the middle of a dumpster fire. And that is just how my life works, honestly. But I will say, from that moment on, I knew I wanted to do something besides just live in this, mucky sort of place with this pain. I knew I wanted to help others. I knew someday I would come on the other side of it. And even though I was right in the midst of it, I remember I took this photo of my stuff being loaded into the storage unit. I even sent it to my ex-husband at the time because I had no idea how fully moved on he was from me. But I said, look, this is temporary, and I know there's more than this. This is not the end of the story. And while it actually was the end of our story, meaning mine and his, it certainly was not the end of my personal story. And no, I'm not going to sit here and tell you, so I got on the dating apps, met the love of my life, and now I've been married for 3 years and have the most amazing husband. That definitely didn't happen, and I cannot wait to get into the whole dating thing and tell you what that's like, because talk about a dumpster fire, nobody is normal anymore. I'm convinced of it. I have had pen pals for years who don't want to actually get to know anybody in person. I have had just crazy stuff, but I don't want to go off on that tangent yet. I want to talk a little bit more about just sort of how did I lean into this new life and what does it mean for you as a listener of Diamonds and Dumpster Fires? So number one, what I want to share is I absolutely did not have this just like all of a sudden, like, oh, this is horrible, but now I'm happy moment. I still struggle every single day. I have this prayer journal. It's a 5-year prayer journal that I keep. And every day you go to it and you enter in your prayer for that specific day. And the cool thing about it is that you can see what you entered the year before and the year before that. And it's the one I have lasts for 5 years. For the last 2 years, my prayers have been the same, and there's a lot of them that have not been answered. And it's painful to reread them. As I'm recording this, it's November of 2024, and I saw in November of 2023, I was begging God to just send me one person who would actually care and get to know me and want to go on a real date with me and actually, be a potential partner in life. And November 2024, there's not been anybody like that. I haven't had a glimpse of it in my life. But what I have done, and what I've really done, is leaned in on my faith. So I was a believer before my divorce. I was involved in church. I was, I would say a strong Christian. But my faith was nothing like it is now. And I don't say that to be all Pollyanna and be like, oh, I'm so glad this horrible thing happened because now I have this faith. No, that's not it at all. Would I go back and change the fact that I'm divorced? In a heartbeat. Would I go back and have my old life again? Absolutely. But I can't, right? We can't go back. And so what I have learned how to do is lean in, trust God as much as possible, and grow in my faith as I'm doing so. There's this quote that I read recently in a book, and I absolutely love it. I'm going to go ahead and read it to you right now. So this is from Swiss psychologist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she wrote, "Beautiful people do not just happen. Do you know any of these beautiful people? People who shine with an inner luminescence, who radiate a kind of moral beauty? These kinds of people don't just happen by accident. They are formed or forged, often in the fire of suffering and pain over a long period of time, into people of love." And that right there is what I am hoping that this podcast will help all of us do. Grow into people of love, grow into people that are better than we were yesterday, right? Because we can all change, we can all grow, we can all lean in more on our faith, we can all determine not to give up, and we can, of course, find the humor along the way. So, what is the moral of the story here? It's certainly not that, if you are a person of faith, life is just going to end up being all glitter and roses and that you'll end up finding exactly what you want at the end of a, shiny rainbow. No, of course not, right? I'm still healing. I am still trying to wrap my head around this new life that I'm living, even though I'm several years in at this point. Look, I have tried and tried and tried to date. And as I've said before, this whole modern dating culture is just a mess. But to make it even worse, I have a side gig of narrating romance novels. So how do you think it worked out for a woman who's basically high on Hallmark every day when she actually got out into this real world of dating that she hadn't been in for over 15 years? It didn't work out all that great, and I am so excited about some of the guests that I'm going to be bringing on to this podcast to talk through, what in the world is happening out there in this dating market or whatever you want to call it. But you know what? And I'm still working through it. I am still trying. They say that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. So I must be insane because I am still on the same dating apps, and in some cases now talking to the same people that I talked to 2-3 years ago, just starting over again because I've run out of options. But this isn't about dating. We will get there. We will have many an episode about dating. But for now, I just wanted to start this podcast off by giving you a little background into who I am, how I came to start this podcast in the first place, where I want to go from here, and that is to help you. So I am really, really excited about the guests that will be coming on. I'm excited about the topics that I have lined up for you and just kind of getting into that nitty-gritty, the practical stuff of what can you do now when you find yourself, stuck in the middle of what seems like one of the darkest moments of your life. How can you move forward? How can you really lean into your faith? And how can your faith actually be strengthened in this time? And again, not in a Pollyanna kind of way where I'm going to tell you, hey, just be happy, put on a smile. No, not at all. Let me tell you this. God can handle hearing all of what you've got going on inside. He already knows it all anyway. And I think sometimes as Christians, we get into this mode where we feel like we have to sort of button up our prayers and share only the highlight reel with God, kind of like we do on social media. And that is not at all the case. Read the Psalms. David lamented in so many of the Psalms. He poured out his heart. Sometimes if you're like me, you read the Psalms and you're like, is that okay for David to say that? Where he's like, asking God to smite his enemies and all this stuff. And I'm not saying you should do that, but, if you do, I don't judge you. But let me just say this. It is okay to pour out your heart to God. In fact, that if there's one thing you take away from this episode, it is that. I spent so many nights just laying on the floor, staring up through the skylight that I have in my house and just begging God to just take away the pain, telling him how unhappy I was, telling him how unfair everything seemed, and telling him I didn't see a way out, and to show me why and what was going on. And no, God's voice did not come booming down through the sky and give me, this happened for reasons A, B, and C. But as time is going on, I can see this, beauty in the ashes of what happened, the diamond in the dumpster fire. I have been able to walk with people through painful circumstances that I might not have been equipped to walk through with them had something like this not happened to me. I've been able to, help people in times of need and be able to say things that speak to what they're feeling. I wouldn't have been able to do that if I myself had not ever gone through something of that nature. And of course, I'm not saying that, we should wish for bad things to happen so that we can walk through bad things with other people. But the reality is we're all going to experience some kind of dumpster fire in life, right? None of us are going to get out of here without ever having conflict or disappointment or fear or pain. It doesn't matter whether that's financial, emotional, social, whatever it is, we are all going to experience these moments in life that we, might call a dumpster fire. And learning how to walk in that so that I can help others, it does help me kind of see perspective a little bit more, as someone comes to me and says, hey, I am going through this divorce right now, and I know you went through it, and how did you wrestle with these things? How did you handle this stuff? It's healing for me to be able to walk with others in that. So I am not one of those people who is going to stand in front of a group and say, hey, everyone, listen to what I did because I know what I'm doing. Not at all, okay? Not at all. In fact, some of the stories that I will be sharing with you on this podcast probably are going to be a little bit embarrassing, if I'm honest, but that's okay because you know what? If it helps one person, it was worth it. So the takeaway from this episode is number one, pour out your heart to God in whatever it is that you're going through. And if you are not a believer and you happen to be listening to this podcast, I challenge you to still do the same thing. You may not have what you would consider a relationship with God, but He still created you, and you may, disagree with me on that, but just take this moment to just, willing suspension of disbelief, if you need to think of it that way. Cry out to God, pour out your heart, just, say everything that's on your mind. There is actually it's so therapeutic sometimes to just be real with God, to just say what it is that you're thinking, that you're feeling. And if you are a believer listening to this podcast, you've probably experienced this to some extent before. But if you are someone who has felt maybe a little bit, like you do need to have these perfectly crafted prayers, I challenge you to let that go, Just be real before God and tell Him everything that's going on in your heart, everything that's going on in your life. He knows anyway, but He wants us to tell Him. He wants us to have that conversation, that two-way back and forth with Him. So, as we continue on in this journey, I am really excited to just share some of the things that I've learned. I'm going to share with you some things I've learned with therapy, things I've learned in books, things I've learned from just conversations. And as I mentioned before, we will have guests on this show. And together, we are going to find those diamonds in the dumpster fires of life, because life is too short to just sit there and, I love that meme of that little dog sitting in the fire and he says, "I'm fine," right? I felt like that for about 3 years, where my world was just burning around me and I did not know how to process it. But we are going to process it together. We are going to find funny moments, use humor as our lifeline, and together we are going to make this world a more beautiful place. So, I would love to invite you to join me in future episodes where we'll explore all these various aspects of finding joy and overcoming life's hurdles. I can't wait to meet you on episode 2. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of Diamonds in Dumpster Fires. Stay tuned for the next episode where we'll dive into more of life's big topics with a sense of humor and without toxic positivity. Please subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and if you could leave a review, that helps the show reach more people and change more lives. Thank you so much.